Nice. How about you, Bassam? How are you this morning?
So we used to give weather reports. Now we do sleep updates.
Hey,
So
I can't be controlled.
I went to sleep at 5 a.m. Because my coaching job that I have, there's a couple of people that work in night shift, and I go do their coaching during their shift. So I was there from midnight till 4 a.m. Came back home, and funny enough, I get up just at 8:59 to join you guys.
Oh my goodness. It sounds like you need a break.
I didn't put an alarm. So if I sleep through it, I'll sleep through it. But somehow I'm there. I'm here.
Oh, I see. Bobby has joined us. I'm gonna just invite you up, Bobby, if you can, and I'd love to hear how you're doing, if you don't mind. If not, feel free to not accept the invitation if you're just resting. Good morning, friend. How are you doing?
Good morning. I'm okay.
Recovering and everything like that?
Yeah, a little on the sore side, but that's okay.
Is there anything we can do to help?
Not that I can think of. I'm just going to take it easy and kind of lounge around today. I'm pretty kind of on the sore side.
Yeah, I can imagine. I know, and I hate to ask, what about gear-wise? Is everything going to be covered?
I think so. I've got a business insurance policy. The only thing that makes me nervous is their insurance people, so I don't trust in my nature.
For sure.
Sorry. And I was switching companies at the first of the month, so I'm sure they're going to be grumpy when they get that big of a claim, 22 days into the policy.
Right.
So, I'm kind of dreading that whole process, and, I'll just have to see how it comes out.
Sure. Well, keep us updated and let us know. I mean, you got a big group of supportful people behind you. So if there's anything that can be done, I mean, we could be there. So.
Oh, I appreciate it. Like I said, right now it's still early, but I'm sure everything will, work out. I got the car back, went and picked up a phone so I could communicate again.
Sure.
And I'm just grumpy. It was right before Jazz Fest because it's one of the bigger contracts out of the year.
Yeah.
And we haven't had it for 2 years, so I was, overly excited, to get back to doing that. But I'll get it sorted out. I appreciate all the well wishes.
Yeah, not at all. Well, we'll definitely be keeping an eye open and make sure you keep us updated and let us know. And you got a lot of people on your side, so just put out the word if you need anything, okay?
Alrighty. I'm just gonna lay here and not move for most of the morning, I think.
I don't blame you. I think you need that. So keep relaxed, my friend.
Yes, I will live vicariously through you all for a little while.
That sounds good.
Thanks.
All right. So, I think that for folks who don't know, unfortunately, Bobby was carjacked and beat, and his gear was stolen in his car, and the gear is gone, and the car has been returned. So thank goodness Bobby is okay and recovering, as he said. But that kind of thing, unfortunately, has happened a couple times in our wider community now. Just dangerous encounters with folks, and it breaks your heart to know these people that you care about, even if you never met them in person or only rarely have met them in person, have to go through this kind of junk. So we're glad that you are recovering friend and that you're okay, because I'm sure that could have gone so much worse. Hate to hear it. But let's go ahead and get started with this morning's show. Matt, are we live?
Oh, we've been live for a little bit.
Okay.
And yeah, everything seems to be up and running. So if anybody wants to watch anything, it's not only on the Stone Tree Facebook and YouTube pages, but I'm also streaming to the Artist Forge Facebook page. So if you want to follow along, if you don't want to be on Clubhouse or you're going somewhere else, just go ahead over there and you'll be able to see at least me bopping around. And then I'm going to throw up wonderful pictures that I've photoshopped of Bassam and Nicole, and there'll be all sorts of clown faces and whatnot. So yes. No, but if you want to watch, it is live. We're going to be doing this every Monday and Friday from here on forward. So hopefully we can start getting a little bit more interaction from those of us that are
Caleb,
talking
are you just
here.
gonna leave? Oh, sorry.
So yeah, if you guys want to join us, feel free. I'm going to be trying to manage all of the comments and do all the things from all of the platforms. So cut me a little bit of slack if I don't see your comment or if I don't respond right away. But I think today is going to be fun. After having done all the webinars that we've done every other Thursday, this is just kind of our natural evolution into how we want to bring some of these conversations to you. But given that we are all kind of off and doing our own things, I figured it would be easier for one person to stream. Whoever can join us can jump on into the studio here, and we'll bring the moderators on. But until that time comes, you get me. So it is what it is. But yeah, feel free to check it out. And then the replays will always be up on YouTube and Facebook. So we can always search for this sort of stuff. Trying to create an archive of these conversations rather than just let them fly off into the ether somewhere.
Perfect. All right. I will get us officially started then for podcasty reasons and say good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Artist Forge Morning Walk, where we learn to think like artists. My name is Nicole York. I will be your host along with Matt Stagliano and Bassam Sabah. Joining us today also is Bobby and Olga, Bobby Thompson and Olga Tinyanin, photographers from different parts of the country doing different stuff, but being awesome all the time anyway. Excuse me. So to end the week this week, we've had some really fantastic conversations from a wide range of topics on things like worry and things like love. And last night we had our final live stream of the month where we got to see some really incredible submissions from our community on the theme of love. And also want to congratulate Nina Covington for a really beautiful photo depicting self-love that was chosen by the community to be the banner image for the Facebook group. And also, she's going to be doing an interview here on the Artist Forge podcast with Matt. So really big congrats to her on a beautiful image. I'm looking forward to when that comes out, and be on the lookout for that, because she'll also have a blog post about her amazing work, sharing all of her goodies. So looking forward to that. Also, the reminder for the podcast family that we will be moving just to Mondays and Fridays starting next week. So the podcast will be coming up twice a week instead of daily during the week. Hopefully that means we have a little bit more time to prepare our content in advance and cover some of the topics that are of interest to everybody. So be looking out for that as well. So yesterday we talked about love and had a few surprising revelations about the way that we work and how the emotion and the action of love was kind of inextricably tied in with the act of being an artist. And I'm wondering this morning if anybody has had any other insights into the emotion or motivation that is tied to creating the work that you create. I know that there are probably some folks who have a very pragmatic approach. This is the way that I make money. This is the business I chose for pragmatic reasons. I know that I can work in the market here and all these kinds of things. And others of us that I've mentioned before, my selfishness, my kind of inherent selfishness in the work that I create. I want to make things for me that make me happy. And I wonder if anybody has had any other insights after that conversation on love about what motivates us to make our work. And is any of that tied to emotion? Are we making kind of purely pragmatic choices as artists, or are these things an outgrowth of who we feel like we have to be? It's kind of a why question, but maybe not as deep. If anybody has any thoughts or insights, don't be afraid to put those in the chat today, or to raise your hand. We can snag you up and hear from you. But I would, excuse me, but if you're up on the panel this morning, I just wonder, is that something you've ever given any thought to? I mean, I know we had some revelations about love. Do you think there's any other emotions that are tied deeply into the work that you create? And if they are, what do you think they are?
I think it's an intrinsic part of how we create, right? I mean, a lot of what we do comes from, at least what I found in the creative world, is a lot of creation comes from that emotion, right? And that could be love, it could be anger, it could be self-hatred, it could be joy, right? And all of those things, for me at least, stimulate an image or an approach to an image. So I'm almost always starting from a place of emotion. I think the more that I've thought about the conversation from yesterday about love, the more that I've started thinking about emotion in my own work. And it's not something that I've ever overtly addressed before. Like, I am going to make an image about this. Not, at least not that I can recall. Maybe I did, but it's so not a part of my normal workflow. But now that we've been talking about it a little bit more, and reviewing the work that I've done, more the personal work rather than the client work, that there are these themes, right? And I said yesterday that it's easy to see those types of themes or those threads in hindsight. So it must mean that those things are being created from a similar place every time. And now I'm starting to identify the emotions that generally carry me forward. And that can be, I find that they're opposites, right? I love doing love, but there's also a kind of a hate or a darker side. There's, confidence, but there's also lack of confidence. There is, just happiness and sadness. I mean, there's all of these things I tend to find that I balance out in both ends. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it gives me breadth. And I think it allows me to just kind of create however I'm feeling. And there's no one way that I have to be like, well, I'm happy, therefore I have to create happy images. It's just understanding how my emotions work and how they play into the creation of my work has been really eye-opening. And it's been 24 hours, so just understanding that these things, I think, come out naturally. But the more that we can look at our own stuff and understand, oh, this is where my mind was, maybe that will start to uncover parts of yourself that you didn't know were being put into your work, that are just kind of a natural part of you. And that might give you insight to what you do going forward. Or not.
Sorry, Matt. I had
I get it.
Taking care of my kiddo this morning, getting him ready for school. So I didn't have as much time to pay attention. Can you repeat the question? Because I heard most of it up until like the last probably 30 seconds.
Yeah, I mean, it's just the long story short is that I think emotion is a natural part of the process, whether we realize it or not. And that, if we look back at our work, we can probably figure out what mindset we were in at a given time. Going forward, I think once you understand that, you have I guess a slant towards one emotion or another in your work, you may find that you're naturally coming from a place of love, or from a place of edginess, or from a place of hatred, and exploring some of those, concepts. But I think it's not for me as prevalent at the beginning of the process, but it's clear by the end of, you know, where these emotions came from, or where the work is being driven by emotion. But yeah, that's just kind of the way that I see it. I think everybody's different, but for me, it's just been this exploration of the topic over the past couple of days. It's really kind of fine-tuned the way that I look at how I use emotion in creating the photography that I do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was thinking, as you were talking, I was trying to think back about whether and how emotion is really involved. And I think there are times when my approach can be super cerebral, but even if I were to exclude all of the particular emotions that have motivated me to create an individual image, and I just look at the motivation to create in general, there is a big part of it there that is wanting to connect with myself, and also another part that is that desire to provide additional comfort or security or whatever for my family. And I think the emotions tied to that one are also kind of those deep-seated needs, and those things are motivational even when it seems like the only emotions tied to things are I'm tired and I want to break and I'm frustrated or I'm burnt out or whatever. It seems like even those emotions of that need to provide and nurture through that work, those seem to exist even when the other ones aren't there. So I mean, I don't know about anybody else if that happens or if they feel that also, but even those emotions are compelling and they don't seem like they should have anything to do with the art at all.
Yeah, that speaks a lot to me. You know, when you said that it may not have anything to do with the art, because in my case, I don't see myself as a creator of images. I don't create every day. I'm not out there to create. I get joy out of having a positive impact on people, and I found that by doing photography, photo shoots, due to the passion, not the passion, due to the interest I got into in photography a few years ago, or whatever, now almost 10 years ago. I found that I get joy out of that as much as I got joy out of other things in life that are no longer in my life. So I found the joy in the process of serving people, and that's what drives me. So that's the emotion I am looking for, is that feeling of joy and satisfaction that I accomplished. Uh, that what I searched to accomplish, which is have a positive impact on somebody. So I'm not constantly in the process of creation, and I don't automatically link uh, emotion with the actual images that I create. Okay. Now, nevertheless, everything we talked about yesterday in terms of how does emotion come into doing photo shoots and the whole process, I mean, obviously that still stands. But I've never really thought about emotions driving creation of art in my case.
Yeah, I mean, that's understandable. And I think so while you're working with a client, Bassam, do you think to yourself, I want to tap into this emotion? Or are you looking at, and I know you mentioned this a little bit yesterday, but are you more looking at the technique of how to communicate that without even necessarily it?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not conscious of, I mean, I go through it. I'm not conscious of exactly how things are happening. But I don't focus on the technical. I don't focus on the process itself. I focus on the individual. I focus on what we're going to do together next, whether it's before the shoot, after the shoot, during the shoot. I go through it with the purpose of serving and getting the most out of it, because that's my nature. Whether it's interacting with people, whether it's having a conversation with somebody, whether it's coaching people, that's the process I go through. Right. So I'm really, I mean, I appreciate what Matt said. I mean, yesterday's conversation has had a real kind of wake up call in terms of, hey, it's something that maybe you should spend a bit of time digging into and understanding more, and maybe I'll look at it completely differently in a few weeks or months or whatever. It's like you said yesterday, we're exploring as we go along. We're finding our way through this subject as we talk.
Yeah, that's been the big thing for me, Bassam, is, I don't know if there's been another topic lately, right? We talked about, kind of like we were talking about on the webinar last night. We've had luck and saying no and setting boundaries and, just doing the thing. We've had all of these great topics. I don't know if there's been one that's carried over so much for so long. For me, I mean, it's been 24 hours, but has made me think and has had immediate impact like this whole emotional conversation has. And, like you, I'm working through it in real time, and it doesn't seem like it should be a hard question. It doesn't seem like we should be able to say, does emotion tie into our work? Of course it does. I mean, we're emotional beings. Of course we're going to be pulling from that in some way, shape, or form. I think the question comes from, how overtly are we aware of that? How much are we bringing that emotion in as an aspect of the work? Or is our mindset subconscious? Is that driving the work? And then we can see what emotions we were going through, right? I know for me, I can be in one mindset and trying to create something happy for a client or something thoughtful, and my mind just isn't in the same place. So I'm bringing in other aspects of whatever is bothering me or is on my mind, and I haven't really had a chance to go back and look and deconstruct some of the images that I've created over the past couple of years and seeing, what emotions were involved in creating those. Now, the interesting thing is I can look at pictures from the past and immediately know where I was in a mindset, point of view, whether I was happy or sad or depressed or, feeling successful or helpful, empathetic, whatever it is. I think it's very easy for me to look at an image and then reconnect myself to that place where I was mentally and emotionally. I don't feel like I go into my work with that aspect of saying, okay, I'm feeling this, therefore I'm going to create something along those lines. I think it's just easier for me to reflect on where I was when I look at the work that was created. I think once you look at that body of work over a period of time, you can say, wow, he was in a really shitty spot for 3 or 4 months. Or, he was, wow, this was great. He was in a phenomenal place. Look at all the proliferation of work and the joy and the happiness in it, whatever it might be. I think that's how I tend to look at my own work, right? The trends, we've talked about this before, about the trends in work and what comes out of it. It's now interesting to throw that emotional component into it as well and understand that I guess, there's a lot more emotion in what I'm creating than I give myself credit for. It's just now having to realize what that is and how do I control it or tap into it when I need to, or just be aware of it. And that's been the interesting thing to think about over the past 24 hours or so.
I really like that you mentioned, Matt, that you're not often necessarily aware that you're in or being aware of being in an emotional space when you're actually creating the photograph. And I was thinking through my own history as you were describing that and thinking about the fact that most of the time, if I'm creating, especially if I'm with people, if I have a team there and a model and everything is going down, I'm in a great mood. I'm like, yeah, I'm making stuff. That's my general emotional mood, right? Is like, woohoo, we're making cool things and I'm excited about stuff and happy to be around people and just in a good mood in general. And then when I compare that to the times when I actually am in an emotional state to create, and more often this has happened with digital art, this has happened with writing, those tend to be the ones, for whatever reason, that allow me to be in my emotions as I'm creating. The experience is definitely very different. And like Bassam, when I'm photographing someone, I am actively making technical choices from a visual literacy standpoint to communicate the emotion I want the viewer to feel when they see the image, and the emotion I want my subjects to project. The color palette choices, the lighting, all of those things are very much these technical choices that I'm making about emotion while not actively feeling the emotion. I might be having a 6'2" tall, Viking looking dude with an axe screaming in my face. And the whole time I'm feeling like, yes, this is amazing. But I'm trying to get an entirely different emotion across through the subject and to the viewer. And I don't know if the images that I create are directly tied to like my emotional state in general. Like, did I decide to, photograph an Einherjar because I was feeling something? I don't know. I don't think so. But the two states, the emotion I'm communicating and the emotion I feel when I'm creating images like that have rarely ever been the same. And it is kind of interesting to contemplate that. I don't know if or what it means, but yeah, it's kind of a crazy thing to think about.
Well, and I really hadn't thought about the question in that way, right? So I totally understand what you're saying, that there's sometimes or maybe often a disconnect between the emotion that we're trying to convey and the emotion that we feel at the time, right? For me, they're all so linked together that it's hard for me to, at least from thinking about it, it's hard for me to create a feeling of happiness in the work if I'm not in that place myself. It's hard for me to create that, that dark, more moody stuff if I'm not feeling some part of that myself. Now, your example of a Viking screaming in your face and you being a little girl in Glee is, I can totally picture it because it's totally you. But I don't know if I do things that way, me. I think I tend to, if I'm happy, I'm creating happier stuff. If I'm sad, I'm creating sadder stuff. If I'm trying to create that emotion just for the impact of the story, for the image, that's fine. I can do it, but I feel like I'm always more connected to the work, or that it's better, it's deeper, it's more authentic when I'm actually in that same state. And so for me, it just seems to be more tied together, versus being able to compartmentalize it, separate it out, which is an important skill to have. I just don't seem to work that way. So it's really interesting to hear you talk about that.
No, I mean, I actually kind of think that's great. And as you were describing that, I just realized potentially how mercurial I can be, because the times when I have shot in the emotion that the image is meant to convey, there are two distinct types, it seems, that happen. One is when I'm working with a really talented model or a subject who is capable of being incredibly vulnerable. And in those cases, they pull me along with them. And while I'm actively shooting, I am absolutely feeling those empathetic feelings that they are sharing with me. But as soon as the camera comes down and I know that I have those shots, I'm elated again. I'm like, yeah, we did it. This is killer. I'm so excited. We did a thing, with the exception of the fine art women's series that I did. Every time I can think of that has happened, like in particular, I worked with one model and actor, and we were playing. I usually play music in the studio that is similar to the feeling that we're trying to create, just to make it easier to get into those places. And the way he was reacting to the song was like watching somebody have a breakdown in real time. And he was acting for the benefit of being able to capture these. But I lost my breath, and everybody who was in the studio at that time, I think it took us a couple of moments after the shooting had stopped and the song had stopped, just to kind of recollect ourselves and bring ourselves back from that, wherever it was that he took us to, because it was a deeply emotional place. If you've heard the song by Sia, Breathe Me, that was the song we were playing that he was essentially embodying. And so, yeah, and at that time, during that moment, that emotion was really deep. But once everything was over and we kind of had a chance to recover, elation was back again. So I don't know if it's interesting to think about. I'm definitely maybe more mercurial than I thought that I was, but yeah, it's just wild to consider how the play of those things happen beforehand, having this idea or these feelings I want them to convey during the process where maybe the feeling is completely connected to the work and maybe it's not at all. And then afterwards, looking back at it, allowing it to affect you, questioning how it's going to affect the viewer. It really is. We're like living roller coasters of emotions, I feel like.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt. It brings me back to WPPI this year, just from the standpoint of emotional impact of work. I was sitting in watching the judging, the live judging of the print competition. And there was one image wound up winning WPPI this year of a young girl with cancer, and she's bald and had, somewhat sunken eyes. You could tell she was not feeling well. And she was wrapped up, and she realized she was wrapped in her own hair that had come out. And it was a showstopper. And it was not only a gorgeous photograph, but just the story behind it stopped the room cold. They had to take a break, and I believe Kat was in the room judging at the time. And it was just an insanely emotional piece. Now, not knowing how the artist created it at the time, I'm not sure what was there, but it was extraordinarily powerful. And, out of all the images that were presented at WPPI, this is the one that wound up winning, right? Because it was so impactful and so emotional. And so for me, it really drove home that example of, what story can be, what emotion can be, how it's tied into the work. And would I be able, I started to question myself, would I be able to create something like that with that much impact so simply? I don't know. I'd like to think so, but I think it's a really great example of emotion, being projected through a photograph, both from the subject, from the artist, and then as the viewer as well. Just all of those different perspectives coming together. It was a really phenomenal piece. I don't set out to do that sort of stuff in my work, but it's interesting to think about. It's not only what we're doing, but how it's being perceived, right? You're a screaming Viking. All of that is another layer of emotion in the work that people might see that we don't necessarily intend or set out to project. So I just think it's a really interesting question to start thinking about this aspect of storytelling in whatever art that we're doing, how our emotions, the emotions that we're trying to portray, and then also the emotions of the viewer of the art or the interactive side of the artwork, what the emotions are going to be there, because that's an entirely different set of emotions that we can't control, no matter what we do. So I love this topic and just thinking through it a little bit.
Same. Okay, panelists. So how do you think about emotion in your work or in the motivation for your work? How is it tied to the work that you create? Or do you feel that it is? We're talking about emotion and artwork today. So would love to hear from our panelists. And if you are in the audience, don't be afraid to put your thoughts in the chat or go ahead and raise your hand and we'll bring you on up.
Hell yes. Hell yes, hell yes, hell yes, hell yes, hell yes, and hell yes. And when I am disconnected emotionally from the session in the moment, it translates. It translates in my sales. It translates in the work that I actually create, like 6 Ways to Sunday. And just to comment on the image Matt was, sorry. I can't remember the photographer's name. Shoot. But yeah, when we were judging that, it was just like everybody took a deep breath in and just immediately started crying. And one of the judges, he sort of gave me some advice after the fact. He fought for the image to receive a 100 because in order for an image to receive 100 as a score, it has to be a unanimous decision. And there were like 97, 98, 99, and he fought for the 100 because when an image is then challenged, the person who's doing the challenging, the judge who's doing the challenging, cannot change their score. So if he came in at 99, then there would have been no way for that photo to ever scored 100 because it wouldn't have been unanimous. And when it finally did, after the challenge came through and everybody unanimously agreed that it was 100, the photographer was in the back and she screamed. And we were all like, whoa, what's happening? And it was like this whole big thing. But yeah, I think emotion definitely drives my work personally. And when I am disconnected emotionally, either from the subject or from the theme or from the just project on an off day, it definitely shows up.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I can imagine a lot of the decisions that you're making at the moment have got to be made based on how you're feeling and how the client's responding to you, how you're responding to them, all of that kind of stuff. Do you find the same thing or the same process, the same maybe emotional process to be true in your client work versus your personal work?
Yes and no. One of the things that I try to do, in that consultation is understand their intentions behind the session. And for some people, that is, a really deep, dark workaround and processing piece. And for other clients, it's very celebratory. So understanding what that intention is ahead of time allows me to prepare emotionally. Because if it is, a heavier process, there is a lot of we're going to stop, allow, hold some space for that person to process whatever that moment is. I had a woman last year uh, who had just recently found out that her daughter had been addicted to opiates for, I think, the better part of a year, and was trying to work through like how to get her help and did she want help and how could she be there for her. But she had booked this photo shoot that was supposed to be celebratory for her 60th birthday. And like in that first look, she just had a complete and total breakdown. And that was a moment where it was like, okay, we're just going to stop. Guys, why don't you go, take 5 and just hold space for her and allow her to experience whatever that emotion is at the time so that she can continue to move forward in a whole way. Um, and whether that's celebratory or, really kind of darker stuff, being engaged there allows for a stronger connection, not just in my work, but with that person. And I could never not want that connection. You know what I mean? Um, that's what drives the work.
For sure. Yeah. I can kind of, it's weird as you're describing that, I can kind of see you working in my head and just imagine you being there and feeling those things and making sure that you're holding space and working out of those emotions. And do you ever find that exhausting at all? Because the few times I felt where I've worked with subjects where I was really or needed to be really deeply invested in how they were feeling, at the end of the day, I was so emotionally drained. I I don't know if I would be able to do it on a regular basis. Do you find that to be true, or do you have a kind of a way to cope with that?
I mean, I can compartmentalize with the best of them. and find that sometimes I have to, right? But I'm also an extrovert, so like, yes, I do need my alone time to recharge, but I don't think it's quite in the same way. Like, I do draw energy from being around other people. So when I'm able to be connected, with other people, that allows me it that is a recharge for me. Um, so I don't know that I suppose if it were like hour on hour on hour on hour, then that would be another story. But we're talking about, a 3-hour session and being present with that client for 3 hours, really, and be able to create something that I'm excited and proud of in that space that allows them to experience their life more fully. I don't really find that so much as draining. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So Olga, Bassam, Bobby, do you have any thoughts? I know, Bassam, you shared a little bit this morning already, but do you have any other additional thoughts about thinking about emotion and how or if it impacts your work or the way you create?
Oops, sorry.
Go ahead, Olga.
I've just been sitting here thinking, and I mean, if anyone looks at my work, especially as of late, I think you can tell that there's definitely a lot of emotion in it, at least portrayed for sure. And the past couple of weeks, Nicole's been on pretty much like anyone close in her life on their case about like why do you create art, and to really think about it. And I think like a week or two ago, I kind of had a revelation about why I created art. And I just woke up, so my voice is all like stuffy. A lot of it for me that I've found is just the yearning for connection, the yearning for validation from my parents, my peers. And I think you can really see that, especially with the more recent stuff, because I think I've really just been deep diving into the kind of art and work that I've really been wanting to make. And I find I've been connecting with that mostly and been more excited about the work that I've been churning out lately, which is because I've been finally kind of, showing my emotions through that, because, I am an immigrant, and in my early life, I didn't know how to speak English. And so there was that disconnect there. And for my entire life, I've just been trying to learn how to connect through something. And so that has to be through my art, because I'm not very good with words, or I just don't feel confident in them. So yearning, the emotion.
I remember when you told me that, and the kind of realization that it had for you. And I know we've talked about this before, but in a really big way, when you come to that place where you all of a sudden have a light bulb moment and you understand what it is that drives you, it seems like it throws light backward onto all of the things that you've done before and things that maybe you didn't always have a way to understand. And all of a sudden, boom, like all that information is there and you recognize it and you're able to go, wow, this is what it has been all along. Like, that insight into yourself is kind of a amazing thing. Do you feel like that's going to affect your work going forward, or does it just affect how you feel about what you do?
Honestly, I don't know. I think I completely agree with Matt. It's just like in the moment, you're just creating, right? I'm doing this light because that's what I want. You're putting this person in this pose because that's what feels right. And then eventually, if you look back, you're like, oh, wow, look at that. Look how sad I was. So I don't think I'll really know until, who knows? I don't know. I'm not very self-reflective, so.
But it makes a lot of sense as a way to process those emotions without having to necessarily reflect on them, do you think?
Sorry, say that again. You broke out.
Oh, I'm sorry. I said it makes a lot of sense when I think about artists as a whole, that the work would be a way to create or reflect or explore those emotions without necessarily having to hurt your own feelings, I guess. A lot of times self-reflection can be a difficult process. And for me, oftentimes I'm like, oh man, like that's not the answer I wanted from myself. I don't like it. But it feels like when we can create in those artistic spaces, it feels like a much safer place to like explore and to allow those emotions to be processed, where you're not like alone by yourself feeling feelings that you have no reprieve from.
Nicole, you just gave me a breakthrough. Again. Yeah, I think 100% that's how I do it. For sure, for me, for artists, you know, they might do it differently, but I don't express myself in any other way except for this one thing. And before I wasn't really fully expressing myself, and now I feel like I really, really am, and feel like I'm in a better mental state for it as well. So yeah, I completely agree. This is kind of my coping, my living, my mechanisms, my art.
It's my art. Throws self dramatically on set.
Has arrived.
The artiste
Has arrived.
Erin loves you. Erin loves you, Olga.
I love Erin. I miss her. We need more adventures.
Erin is the best. Okay, so we've got about 20 minutes, less than 20 minutes, I guess, closer to 10. Toward the end of the hour, and I want to make sure if anybody has anything they feel like they want to add or touch on before we go, I want to make sure we have time for that. And if you're in the audience today and you have some thoughts about how emotion impacts or motivates or does it the work that you create, we want to make sure we hear from you. But what do you think, guys? Do you have anything else you want to make sure we talk about or touch on as we near the end of the hour?
I guess one question I'll throw out to everyone is, who do you feel has, in your whatever field, photography, digital art, writing, whatnot, who do you look to be the person that is great at emotional impact through their work? Who really gets you in the heartstrings or makes you feel things unlike any other artist? Who's at the top of your list on that?
Peter Lindberg.
Yeah.
Same.
Yeah. And for me, and Kat will have to say if this is the same for her, but for me, I think it's the vulnerability he's able to get from his models and the expressions that they're willing to share with the camera and the really intimate connection. Almost, in a way, it almost feels as if it's either inviting you in or challenging you to feel. And those, even the black and white, the lack of processing, I think all those things for me, and his use of light always makes me feel like I'm connected to the person and the image.
I'm going to say the Coen brothers. They're masterful in all of ways. And if you haven't seen any of their movies, do it.
Hearing you say the Coen brothers explains so much about my understanding of you now, Olga. Totally get it. Yeah, for me, it was Lindberg too. I've got coffee table books downstairs stacked of Lindberg's work and Helmut Newton. And, I love exactly what you were talking about. And he's who I had in mind when you started talking, Nicole, when I asked the question, and you came up with that. And, I think Kat's in the same spot. It's that raw intensity, right? That's the thing that I love about it. So great.
Me too. Also, since Olga mentioned the Coen brothers, I have to say Hans Zimmer. Also, if we're going all big and wide, not in my field, but that man seems to poke all my emotional buttons with his music every single damn time. Doesn't matter the movie.
Yeah, he's done a thing or two, hadn't he?
He has. Indeed, he has.
Sorry, who? Whom?
Hans Zimmer, composer, does a lot of movie scores and lots of theatrical cinematic type of music.
Gladiator and
Sounds fake. I've never heard of him. I'm totally kidding.
Anybody else have any artists they want to share? Don't be scared, y'all.
In the chat, Tara's mentioning Irving Penn, which, it's,
Ooh.
Yeah, that's phenomenal as well. It's kind of where I model a lot of my approach to photography off of is Irving Penn, Peter Lindberg, Helmut Newton, Annie Leibovitz, right? Just these straight connections rather than something largely conceptual or thematic. It's trying to understand how I can capture something and have the viewer understand the moment, or they can interpret it however they want. But for me, it tends to be lack of overt literal type of emotion, and just leave it up to the viewer, right? I know where I was, I know where the subject was, but what does the viewer think? And I just want to make that connection. I want to show the connection between the photographer and the subject and see how people interpret that. So yeah, my stuff tends to be along those lines, or at least I try to. That's who I'm inspired by. And Irving Penn is of course in there. Absolutely.
This might be cliche, but I had to say Van Gogh, because I can't think of a single piece of his work where it doesn't feel like he painted with his emotions. Like the whole palette is however he felt about whatever it is he was working on. At least it feels that way when I see the work. And I always remember, I don't know if Neil deGrasse Tyson was the first person who said this or not, but I happened to be watching an interview with him, and he was wearing a Van Gogh tie. And he said that was what he loved about Starry Night in particular, was that he didn't paint that scene, which had been an oft painted, that town had been an oft painted place, but he painted the way that it felt to stand there at night and look down at the city and the lights of the stars and the lights of the town. And I thought, yeah, that's 100% it. There doesn't seem to be a single image of him that is not, or of his, that's not dripping with emotion.
Yeah, and herein lies a conversation that we could probably have for hours, right? People that are masters at bringing emotion into things. Tom Hanks, Wes Anderson, right? Mozart. People that are these prolific artists, why is it that we're so connected to them? And I'm not trying to switch topics here, but I think it's just something that we could probably talk about for hours and hours and hours, comparing and contrasting. And I'm sure that we would find something beyond just emotion. Maybe it's an approach, maybe it's their techniques, or the subtleties that each one of these prolific artists has, that is that emotional connection to all of us, right? Not just one person here or there, but why they're able to succeed with the things that they do by using emotion in a certain way. I think there's something that we could probably learn from that if we studied it long and hard enough. Not an art school guy, clearly, and I'm sure there are thousands of books on this topic, but it would be interesting to see from a contemporary standpoint who is doing that well, and what are the things that they're doing to get that emotion across. It'd be interesting to think.
Brooke Shaden.
Yeah.
I think she's,
Yep.
Whether her work is in a preferred style, of course, everybody has their own tastes, but I think she communicates emotion really beautifully. Martina saying, glass artist Dale Chihuly. If you've never heard of Chihuly glass before, I definitely encourage you to look it up. There's absolute emotion in that work. For me, every time I see his work, it feels like joy. So definitely encourage folks to go check him out. Tara saying Georgia O'Keeffe. Her work, yes. And now getting to be here in the Southwest and getting to see some of the places, some of the flowers in person, some of the things that she painted. The inherent femininity of her work is something I've always absolutely loved. Tara said, I need to take time for my own creative work outside of client work. This has me so inspired. Yay! Yes.
I'm going to go ahead and throw my Caravaggio major.
Yeah. I agree with you there.
I'm going to throw in the name of Yusuf Karsh, one of my favorite portrait photographers.
Yes. Oh, I'm so glad. Yes. Oh, I agree.
I'll throw out the photojournalist Peter and David Turnley. They've been two big influences, and I think Peter has really done some good work in Ukraine lately, and with his last book on Human Faces COVID, I thought was brilliant.
Oh, we have so many artists to check out. So I would encourage folks to share their favorite artists in the Facebook group. Let's go and explore the art that everybody loves and see if we can connect to it as well and maybe get exposed to some artists that we didn't know about before. So what I love about this conversation so much is it just reminds us to get to the heart of what we do. And I know Bassam had actually mentioned this at some point in the past, and I don't remember the exact conversation, but I think, Bassam, you said something along the lines of that your art, I think you were telling this to me, that your art isn't necessarily what you make, it is your brain. You said something similar to that. It's the way you approach or the way that you do things or something like that. And that has stuck with me as a way to think about what it is that we do, because the art really does happen internally. And the way that we create it is an external process that, of course, we master so that we can communicate. But what happens, the important part of what happens, all starts inside and then gets manifested through whatever medium we have chosen. And I wonder how many painters would have chosen photography if they could have before photography was available to them. And I wonder how many artists now would have chosen a different medium, one that won't be available for another, 50 years or something, had it been available as a means of expression. Because ultimately the means is, I don't want to say that it's secondary, but it definitely makes me pay attention to the fact that the art is an outflowing from the artist and the means just happens to be the vehicle. And I wonder what you guys think of that really quickly before we close down.
Can you repeat the question, Nicole?
I'm sorry. Sometimes I think my mind or my brain is going way faster than knowing if I'm actually allowing people to process things. The art really isn't in the painting or in the photographing or in the singing. It is internal, and then it manifests itself via our set of skills. And that I don't know how integral the skills are themselves. Maybe somebody who is a singer would always have been a singer. And maybe the act of singing is important to the way that they communicate, and without it, maybe they would be stuck. I don't know, but it seems to me that this is just a reminder that the tools are not the important part, that what we are and who we are, and that's the important part. Maybe I'm still not making sense.
No, you are. And I think that's actually a great way to probably land this plane, is that, there is no one right way to do this. There is no one perfect way to display emotion or get emotion across, right? You use the skills and the tools that you have to express yourself in whatever way that feels right. And the hope is that other people will not only see it and understand it, but also get some meaning from it, right? Whether it's a pot, whether it's a painting, whether it's a photograph, whether it's a book. I think the intention that the artist puts into it is that other people will find it and connect with it, right? I don't think it has to be of a certain standard or certain look or feel or quality. I think so long as we're using the skills and the tools that we have to communicate what it is that we're feeling, then that just allows other people to share in that and make better connections. And that's, to me, is core to what art really is. And that's why it's so open to interpretation. It's because you get all these people with all these tools and all these skills putting out what they think is best. And yeah, there's no standard for that in my eyes. It's just individuals putting out the best parts of themselves, or sometimes the worst parts of themselves, but it is something that they're sharing. And that, to me, is the crux of it all. Doesn't matter where the emotion lands, what it is, how you're interpreting it. It's the act of putting it out there, the act of that creation and bringing it to the world and seeing what it does. I love that. And I don't think there's a wrong way to do it.
Agreed. I like that. All right, yeah, let's land this plane there then. I think you said it as well as anybody could have. So first, I want to remind everybody, big thanks for being here. Always grateful to have everybody show up. But next week, we will begin a schedule of only being together on Mondays and Fridays. We are kind of condensing our time. So Mondays, and we will not only be here on Clubhouse, but also, as Matt mentioned at the beginning of the show, we are live streaming via StreamYard to the Artist Forge Facebook group and the Artist Forge page and the YouTube channels. Just, we are going to be all over the place. So we hope that you will join us however you prefer, Mondays and Fridays at 7 a.m. Mountain Standard Time. That's 6 a.m. for the West Coast and 9 a.m. for the East Coast, afternoon for our friends overseas. And also, we have a winner for the April challenge, and it is Nina Covington. So I would encourage everybody. I will have that banner image up in Facebook group and on the page today. So I would encourage everybody to make sure you go and check that out and celebrate and congratulate Nina, and be on the lookout for her interview and article that will be coming up shortly. And that leads us into the May challenge, and the theme is self-portraits. So take a portrait or make a portrait or create a piece of art that is a portrait of you. Remember, think creatively. It doesn't even have to have your face in it. In fact, you don't even necessarily have to be in the image itself, but it just needs to be you. So take some time, go make that, and then I will have a post up in the Facebook group that says TAF May Challenge with the theme, and you can put your self-portrait right in the comments of that pinned post. So we want you to make something beautiful, share it with us. And then in the meantime, new schedule one more time, Mondays and Fridays at 6 a.m. Pacific time, 9 a.m. Eastern time. Come and be with us. We don't want to miss our time with you. And until next week, have an amazing weekend. Go make something wonderful. Olga and I are going to traipse down to White Sands this weekend to go explore the dunes. So wish us luck and not cameras full of sand. And until next week, have an amazing weekend, everybody. We will see you then. Bye.